In the annals of 21st-century criminal history, few cases have illustrated the dark intersection of social media, mental illness, and extreme violence as dramatically as that of Luca Magnotta. Born Eric Clinton Kirk Newman, this Canadian man became internationally notorious in May 2012 when he murdered Lin Jun, a Chinese international student, and posted a graphic video of the killing online. The case would captivate and horrify audiences worldwide, not only for its extreme brutality but also for how it demonstrated the potential for the Internet to amplify and distribute the most heinous acts of human cruelty. The Magnotta case represents a watershed moment in criminal history, marking one of the first times that a premeditated murder was filmed, edited, and distributed online with the apparent intent of achieving viral fame. The investigation that followed would span multiple countries and involve international law enforcement cooperation on an unprecedented scale. The case would ultimately raise profound questions about mental illness, the nature of fame in the digital age, the responsibility of Internet platforms, and the challenges facing law enforcement in an increasingly connected world. This comprehensive examination explores Magnotta's troubled background, his escalating pattern of disturbing behavior, the horrific murder of Lin Jun, the international manhunt that followed, and the complex legal proceedings that sought to bring justice while grappling with questions of mental illness and criminal responsibility. The case serves as a dark mirror reflecting the potential dangers of our hyperconnected world and the ways in which technology can be weaponized by those seeking notoriety through violence. Eric Clinton Kirk Newman was born on July 24, 1982, in Scarborough, Ontario, to Anna Yorkin and Donald Newman. From his earliest years, his life was marked by instability, mental health issues, and a troubled family environment that would contribute to his later psychological problems and criminal behavior. Eric's childhood was characterized by significant dysfunction within his family unit. His parents' relationship was tumultuous and often violent, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty in the household. Donald Newman struggled with his own mental health issues and was often absent from his son's life, either physically or emotionally. Anna Yorkin, Eric's mother, also battled mental illness and was frequently unable to provide the stable, nurturing environment that a developing child requires. The family's financial situation was precarious throughout Eric's childhood, with frequent moves and periods of instability that prevented him from forming lasting friendships or connections to his community. This rootlessness would become a defining characteristic of his adult life, as he continued to move frequently and reinvent himself with new identities and personas. From an early age, Eric displayed signs of the mental illness that would plague him throughout his life. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia as a teenager, a condition that was inadequately treated and managed throughout his adolescence and young adulthood. The combination of his genetic predisposition to mental illness, his traumatic childhood experiences, and the lack of consistent treatment created a perfect storm for psychological deterioration. Eric's school years were marked by social isolation and academic struggles. He was often bullied by his peers and had difficulty forming normal social relationships. His behavior was frequently erratic and inappropriate, leading to conflicts with teachers and administrators. Despite his obvious intelligence, his academic performance was poor due to his inability to focus and his increasingly disconnected relationship with reality. During his teenage years, Eric began to show signs of the identity confusion and grandiose fantasies that would later characterize his adult behavior. He became obsessed with fame and celebrity culture, often claiming to have connections to famous people or to be involved in modeling and entertainment ventures that existed only in his imagination. The transformation of Eric Newman into Luca Magnotta began in his early 20s as he struggled to establish an adult identity while battling untreated mental illness. The name change, which he legally completed in 2006, was just the beginning of an elaborate process of self-reinvention that would ultimately lead to tragedy. The choice of the name, Luca Magnotta, was deliberate and symbolic, reflecting Eric's desire to create a new persona that was more glamorous and appealing than his troubled past. The surname, Magnotta, was borrowed from a minor character in the film, Catch Me If You Can, a movie about a con artist who successfully assumed multiple false identities. This choice would prove to be prophetic, as Luca would spend the next several years creating and maintaining various false personas. Luca's early attempts at fame were focused on the fashion and modeling industry. He created elaborate online profiles claiming to be a successful model and actor, complete with professional-looking photographs and fabricated career achievements. He submitted applications to modeling agencies and reality television shows, often accompanied by grandiose claims about his talents and experiences. However, Luca's attempts to break into legitimate entertainment were largely unsuccessful. His inability to distinguish between fantasy and reality, combined with his erratic behavior and obvious psychological problems, made him unemployable in any legitimate capacity. Rejection after rejection only intensified his desperation for recognition and fame. As his legitimate attempts at fame failed, Luca began to explore more unconventional and disturbing methods of gaining attention. He started creating increasingly bizarre and attention-seeking content for various online platforms, including videos and posts that hinted at violent fantasies and disturbing psychological preoccupations. The Internet provided Luca with a platform for his delusions and a means of creating the celebrity persona he craved. Social media platforms allowed him to construct elaborate fictional narratives about his life and achievements, and the anonymous nature of much online interaction meant that his deceptions were rarely challenged or exposed. Throughout the late 2000s and early 2010s, Luca Magnotta exhibited a pattern of increasingly disturbing behavior that should have served as warning signs of his potential for violence. This escalation was documented across various online platforms and witnessed by numerous individuals who interacted with him during this period. One of the most concerning aspects of Luca's behavior was his growing fascination with violence and death. He began posting disturbing content online, including videos and images that depicted or suggested violence against animals and humans. These posts were often accompanied by grandiose claims about his own importance and destiny, suggesting a growing disconnect from reality. In 2010, Luca gained international attention when he posted videos online showing himself killing kittens. These videos, which he titled "One Boy, Two Kittens" and "Python Christmas," showed him suffocating and feeding kittens to a python. The videos sparked outrage among animal rights activists and Internet users worldwide, leading to an international effort to identify and prosecute him. The kitten-killing videos were significant for several reasons beyond their obvious cruelty. They demonstrated Luca's willingness to commit acts of extreme violence for the purpose of gaining attention and notoriety. They also showed his technical skill in video production and his understanding of how to create content that would generate strong emotional reactions and viral spread. The response to the kitten videos also revealed Luca's reaction to negative attention. Rather than being deterred by the widespread condemnation, he seemed to relish the notoriety and the fact that thousands of people were talking about him. This positive reinforcement from negative attention would prove to be a crucial factor in his psychological development and his eventual escalation to human violence. Law enforcement agencies in multiple countries investigated the kitten videos, but tracking down Luca proved difficult due to his use of false identities and his frequent changes of location. The international nature of the Internet also complicated jurisdictional issues, as the videos were uploaded and viewed across multiple countries with different laws regarding animal cruelty. The failure to successfully prosecute Luca for the kitten killings was a missed opportunity that might have prevented his later, more serious crimes. The case highlighted the challenges that law enforcement faces in dealing with Internet-based crimes and the difficulties of prosecuting individuals who operate across international boundaries. On May 25, 2012, Luca Magnotta's escalating pattern of violence reached its horrific culmination with the murder of Lin Jun, a 33-year-old international student from China who was studying at Concordia University in Montreal. The murder was not only brutal in its execution but was deliberately filmed and edited into a video that Magnotta would later distribute online, seeking to achieve the viral fame that had previously eluded him. Lin Jun was pursuing a degree in computer science and was known to his friends and classmates as a quiet, dedicated student who was working hard to build a better life for himself and his family back in China. He had come to Canada with hopes and dreams of academic success and eventual career opportunities that would allow him to support his parents and create a prosperous future. The circumstances of how Luca and Lin Jun met remain somewhat unclear, but evidence suggests that they may have encountered each other through online dating or social networking platforms. What is certain is that on the evening of May 24, 2012, Lin Jun went to Luca's apartment at 5720 Decry Boulevard in Montreal, apparently expecting a social encounter that would instead end in his brutal death. The murder itself was planned and premeditated, as evidenced by the video equipment that Luca had set up in his apartment and the methodical way in which he carried out the killing. The video, which Luca titled, "One Lunatic One Ice Pick," showed him stabbing Lin Jun to death with an ice pick while the victim was tied to a bed. The violence did not end with the killing, as Luca proceeded to dismember the body and engage in acts of necrophilia and cannibalism, all while the camera continued to record. The video was approximately 10 minutes long and was edited with music and special effects, demonstrating that Luca had spent considerable time and effort in its production. The choice of music, True Faith, by New Order, and the deliberate pacing of the video suggested that Luca viewed his crime as a form of artistic expression rather than simply an act of violence. The level of planning involved in the murder was extensive and disturbing. Luca had purchased the video equipment, prepared the location, and researched methods of dismemberment and disposal. He had also apparently studied the methods used by other notorious killers, incorporating elements from famous murder cases into his own crime. Following the murder of Lin Jun, Luca Magnotta engaged in a series of actions that demonstrated both his desire for notoriety and his complete detachment from normal human empathy. Rather than attempting to conceal his crime, he actively sought to publicize it and ensure that it would gain maximum attention and shock value. The dismemberment of Lin Jun's body was carried out with methodical precision, and Luca used the resulting body parts in a deliberate campaign to terrorize and gain attention. He mailed packages containing body parts to various political and educational institutions across Canada, including the Conservative Party headquarters in Ottawa and elementary schools in Vancouver. On May 29, 2012, a package containing a severed foot was delivered to the Conservative Party of Canada headquarters in Ottawa. The package was addressed to the Prime Minister and was discovered by staff members who immediately contacted police. A second package, containing a severed hand, was intercepted by Canada Post before it could be delivered to the Liberal Party of Canada headquarters. Additional packages were sent to elementary schools in Vancouver, creating panic and terror among parents, students, and educators. The targeting of schools was particularly disturbing, as it demonstrated Luca's willingness to traumatize children and families in his quest for notoriety. The packages were intercepted before reaching their intended destinations, but the threat they represented sent shockwaves through the Canadian education system. Meanwhile, Luca uploaded the murder video to various online platforms, including shock websites and video sharing services. The graphic nature of the content meant that it was quickly removed from most mainstream platforms, but it continued to circulate on darker corners of the internet where such content was tolerated or even encouraged. The video's distribution was aided by Luca's understanding of internet culture and viral marketing techniques. He used provocative titles, shocking thumbnail images, and strategic timing to maximize the video's reach and impact. His goal was clearly to achieve the kind of viral fame that had eluded him through legitimate means, regardless of the human cost of his actions. The discovery of the body parts and the identification of Luca Magnotta as the perpetrator triggered one of the largest international manhunts in recent history. Canadian law enforcement agencies immediately issued warrants for Magnotta's arrest, but by the time his identity was confirmed, he had already fled the country. The manhunt was complicated by Luca's history of using false identities and his apparent skill at evading detection. Investigators discovered that he had been using multiple fake names and had created elaborate online personas to conceal his true identity and activities. This pattern of deception made it difficult to track his movements and predict his next actions. Interpol issued a red notice for Magnotta, making him one of the world's most wanted fugitives. The International Police Organization coordinated efforts among law enforcement agencies in multiple countries, sharing intelligence and resources to track down the killer. The case became a test of international cooperation in criminal investigations and demonstrated both the possibilities and limitations of global law enforcement coordination. The search for Magnotta was aided by his own apparent desire for attention and publicity. Rather than simply hiding and trying to avoid detection, he seemed to enjoy the notoriety of being an international fugitive. He was spotted in various locations across Europe, apparently making little effort to disguise his appearance or avoid public places where he might be recognized. Social media and internet surveillance played crucial roles in tracking Magnotta's movements. His continued use of online platforms and his inability to completely disconnect from the digital world provided investigators with valuable clues about his location and activities. The case demonstrated how difficult it has become for fugitives to completely disappear in an era of ubiquitous digital surveillance and social media connectivity. The manhunt also revealed the power of crowdsourced investigation in the digital age. Internet users around the world contributed to the search effort by analyzing photos and videos, sharing information about potential sightings, and providing tips to law enforcement. This citizen participation was both helpful and problematic, as it sometimes led to false leads and harassment of innocent individuals. On June 4, 2012, approximately 1 week after the murder video was first posted online, Luca Magnotta was captured at an internet cafe in Berlin, Germany. His arrest came after an intensive international manhunt that had involved law enforcement agencies across multiple continents and generated massive media attention worldwide. The circumstances of Magnotta's capture were somewhat anticlimactic given the scale of the manhunt that had preceded it. He was recognized by a staff member at the internet cafe who had seen his photograph in media reports about the case. The employee contacted German police, who arrested Magnotta without incident as he sat browsing the internet, apparently reading news coverage about himself and the international search effort. At the time of his arrest, Magnotta was carrying minimal identification and appeared to have been living as a transient since fleeing Canada. Despite being one of the world's most wanted fugitives, he had made little effort to alter his appearance or hide his identity, suggesting either extreme confidence in his ability to evade capture or a subconscious desire to be caught and face the consequences of his actions. The arrest in Berlin created immediate diplomatic and legal complications, as multiple countries had competing claims for jurisdiction over Magnotta and his crimes. Germany, where he was physically located, had the immediate custody of the suspect. Canada, where the murder had been committed, had the strongest legal claim for prosecution. Other countries where body parts had been sent or where Magnotta had traveled during his flight also had potential legal interests in the case. The extradition process was swift but complex, involving negotiations between Canadian and German authorities about the conditions under which Magnotta would be returned to face trial. The German government ultimately agreed to extradite Magnotta to Canada, but only after receiving assurances that he would not face the death penalty, which Germany opposes on principle. Magnotta's behavior during his detention in Germany was consistent with his long history of attention-seeking and grandiose delusions. He reportedly enjoyed the media attention and seemed pleased that his crimes had generated international headlines. His apparent satisfaction with his notoriety was deeply disturbing to observers and provided insights into his psychological motivation for committing such extreme acts. Lin Jun was far more than simply a victim of Luca Magnotta's violence. He was a young man with dreams, aspirations, and a loving family who had invested everything in his education and future success. Understanding Lin Jun's background and the impact of his death provides crucial context for comprehending the full tragedy of this case. Born in Wuhan, China, Lin Jun came from a modest but loving family that had sacrificed significantly to provide him with educational opportunities. His parents, like many Chinese families, viewed education as the pathway to a better life and had invested their life savings in their son's studies abroad. Lin Jun was their pride and joy, a bright and dedicated student who had earned the opportunity to study at Concordia University in Montreal. Lin Jun's decision to study in Canada represented enormous hope and opportunity for his family. The chance to earn a degree from a prestigious North American university was seen as a pathway to career opportunities that would not only improve Lin Jun's life but also allow him to support his parents and give back to his community in China. Friends and classmates described Lin Jun as a quiet, studious young man who was focused on his academic goals. He was majoring in computer science and had demonstrated excellent academic performance since arriving in Montreal. His professors noted his dedication to his studies and his potential for success in his chosen field. Despite being in a foreign country with a different language and culture, Lin Jun had begun to build a life for himself in Montreal. He had made friends among his fellow international students and had begun to explore the city and its opportunities. His English was improving, and he was beginning to feel more confident and settled in his new environment. The impact of Lin Jun's death on his family was devastating beyond measure. His parents had invested not only their financial resources but their emotional hopes and dreams in their son's success. The news of his brutal murder, delivered through international media coverage of the case, shattered their lives and left them struggling to comprehend how such a tragedy could have occurred. The Chinese community in Montreal and across Canada was also deeply affected by Lin Jun's death. The case highlighted the vulnerability of international students and raised concerns about safety and security for Chinese nationals studying abroad. The brutality of the crime and its apparent random nature created fear and anxiety among students who had come to Canada seeking education and opportunity. The murder video that Luca Magnotta created and distributed online represents one of the most disturbing examples of violence deliberately produced for internet consumption. The video, titled "One Lunatic One Ice Pick," was not simply a recording of a spontaneous act of violence but a carefully planned and produced piece of content designed to shock and horrify viewers while bringing fame to its creator. The production values of the video were surprisingly sophisticated, suggesting that Magnotta had spent considerable time planning and preparing for the recording. The video was shot from multiple angles using several cameras, and it was edited with professional software to include music, title cards, and special effects. This level of production indicated that the murder was not an impulsive act but a deliberate performance designed for online distribution. The content of the video was so graphic and disturbing that most mainstream internet platforms immediately banned it upon discovery. However, the video continued to circulate on shock websites, dark web platforms, and through peer-to-peer file sharing networks. The underground distribution of the video created a phenomenon where millions of people were aware of its existence, but relatively few had actually seen its contents. The choice of music for the video, True Faith, by New Order, was particularly unsettling, as it suggested that Magnotta viewed his crime as some form of artistic expression. The upbeat, synthesized music created a jarring contrast with the horrific violence being depicted, adding an extra layer of psychological disturbing to an already unwatchable piece of content. Magnotta's decision to distribute the video online represented a new evolution in criminal behavior, demonstrating how digital technology could be used to amplify the impact of violent crimes far beyond their immediate physical effects. The video ensured that Lin Jun's murder would be witnessed by potentially millions of people worldwide, transforming a single act of violence into a global trauma. The distribution strategy also revealed Magnotta's sophisticated understanding of internet culture and viral marketing techniques. He used provocative titles, strategic timing, and multiple platforms to maximize the video's reach and ensure that it would continue to circulate even after being removed from mainstream sites. The investigation into Lin Jun's murder was one of the most complex and technologically sophisticated criminal investigations in Canadian history. The Montreal Police Service, working in coordination with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and international law enforcement agencies, employed cutting-edge digital forensics and traditional detective work to piece together the evidence against Magnotta. The investigation began with the discovery of Lin Jun's torso in a suitcase behind Magnotta's apartment building on May 29, 2012. The location of the remains immediately led investigators to Magnotta's apartment, where they found a crime scene that confirmed their worst fears about the nature of the murder. The apartment contained extensive evidence of the killing, including blood evidence, video equipment, and other materials used in the crime. Digital forensics played a crucial role in building the case against Magnotta. Investigators analyzed his computer equipment, internet search history, and online activities to establish a timeline of events and demonstrate premeditation. The evidence showed that Magnotta had been researching methods of killing and dismemberment for months before the murder, and that he had been planning the video production aspects of the crime. The investigation also involved extensive analysis of surveillance footage from various locations around Montreal. Security cameras had captured Magnotta's movements in the days leading up to and following the murder, providing crucial evidence about his activities and state of mind. This footage also helped establish the timeline of events and corroborate other evidence in the case. International cooperation was essential to the investigation, as evidence was scattered across multiple countries and jurisdictions. The packages containing body parts that were mailed to various locations required coordination between Canadian federal authorities and local law enforcement agencies across the country. The international manhunt required cooperation with police forces in Europe and other regions where Magnotta was suspected of traveling. The role of Internet users in the investigation was both helpful and problematic. While crowdsourced investigation efforts provided valuable tips and information, they also generated false leads and sometimes interfered with official law enforcement activities. The case demonstrated both the potential benefits and the significant risks of citizen participation in criminal investigations. The question of Luca Magnotta's mental health became central to both the investigation and the eventual trial. His long history of diagnosed mental illness, combined with the extreme nature of his crimes, raised complex questions about criminal responsibility and the relationship between mental illness and violent behavior. Magnotta had been diagnosed with schizophrenia as a teenager, but his treatment had been inconsistent and often inadequate. The Canadian mental health system's failure to provide appropriate long-term care and monitoring for individuals with serious mental illness was highlighted by the case, as Magnotta had essentially fallen through the cracks of the system despite his obvious need for intensive treatment. Multiple psychiatric evaluations were conducted during the investigation and trial preparation. These evaluations revealed a complex picture of an individual suffering from severe mental illness but also displaying characteristics of antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. The combination of these conditions created a dangerous individual who was both psychologically unstable and manipulative. The psychiatric experts who examined Magnotta noted his grandiose delusions and his complete disconnect from reality regarding the consequences of his actions. He continued to believe that his crimes would bring him fame and recognition, and he seemed genuinely surprised by the negative reaction they generated. This disconnect suggested a level of mental illness that impaired his ability to understand the moral and legal implications of his behavior. However, the evaluations also revealed that Magnotta retained significant cognitive abilities and was capable of planning and executing complex schemes. His ability to create false identities, evade law enforcement, and manipulate others suggested that his mental illness, while severe, did not completely impair his capacity for rational thought and decision-making. The question of whether Magnotta's mental illness constituted a defense to the criminal charges became a central issue in the trial preparation. Under Canadian law, mental illness can be a defense to criminal charges if it impairs the defendant's ability to understand the nature and consequences of their actions or to distinguish between right and wrong. The trial of Luca Magnotta began on September 29, 2014, in Montreal before Justice Guy Cournoyer of the Quebec Superior Court. The proceedings were conducted under extraordinary security measures due to the international attention the case had attracted and the graphic nature of the evidence that would be presented. Magnotta was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Lynn June, as well as additional charges related to the dismemberment of the body, the mailing of body parts, and the harassment and threats directed at various institutions and individuals. The first-degree murder charge indicated that prosecutors believed they could prove that the killing was planned and deliberate. The prosecution's case was built around the extensive evidence of premeditation and planning that investigators had uncovered. They presented evidence of Magnotta's internet searches, his purchase of murder weapons and video equipment, and his detailed preparation of the crime scene. The video itself served as the most powerful piece of evidence, providing graphic documentation of the murder and demonstrating Magnotta's complete lack of remorse or empathy. The defense strategy focused on Magnotta's mental illness and argued that he was not criminally responsible for his actions due to his psychiatric condition. Defense attorneys presented extensive psychiatric evidence suggesting that Magnotta was suffering from a severe mental illness that impaired his ability to understand the nature and consequences of his actions. The trial featured dramatic testimony from psychiatric experts on both sides, with competing interpretations of Magnotta's mental state and its impact on his criminal responsibility. The prosecution's experts argued that while Magnotta was mentally ill, he retained the capacity to understand right from wrong and to plan and execute complex criminal schemes. The presentation of evidence was particularly challenging due to the graphic nature of the murder video and crime scene photographs. The court took special precautions to protect jurors and observers from unnecessary trauma while ensuring that the evidence was properly presented. Many observers, including some court personnel, required counseling after viewing the evidence. On December 23, 2014, after deliberating for 8 days, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all charges against Luca Magnotta. The jury rejected the defense's argument that Magnotta was not criminally responsible due to mental illness, concluding that while he was severely mentally ill, he understood the nature and consequences of his actions and was capable of distinguishing between right and wrong. The first-degree murder conviction carried an automatic sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 25 years under Canadian law. Justice Cournoyer also imposed additional sentences for the other charges, ensuring that Magnotta would remain in prison for the rest of his natural life even if he were eventually granted parole on the murder conviction. The verdict was met with relief by Lin Jun's family and friends, who had traveled from China to attend the trial and see justice served. For them, the conviction represented some measure of closure and validation that their loved one's life had value and that his killer would be held accountable for his actions. The sentencing hearing provided an opportunity for victim impact statements that highlighted the devastating consequences of Magnotta's crimes. Lin Jun's family spoke eloquently about their loss and the impact that his death had on their lives and dreams. Their statements provided a human face to the tragedy and reminded observers that behind the sensational aspects of the case was a family destroyed by senseless violence. Magnotta's own behavior during the verdict and sentencing was consistent with his long pattern of attention-seeking and grandiose delusions. He showed little emotion when the guilty verdicts were read and seemed more interested in the media coverage than in the legal consequences he was facing. The Magnotta case had significant implications for Internet regulation and policy, particularly regarding the distribution of violent content and the responsibilities of online platforms. The ease with which Magnotta was able to distribute his murder video highlighted gaps in content moderation and raised questions about how to prevent similar material from being shared online. Major Internet platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, were forced to confront the challenges of identifying and removing extremely violent content while balancing concerns about censorship and free expression. The case led to improved automated detection systems and faster response times for removing prohibited content. The international nature of the Internet meant that even when major platforms successfully removed the murder video, it continued to circulate on smaller, less regulated websites. This highlighted the limitations of content regulation in a decentralized Internet environment and the difficulties of completely suppressing information once it has been distributed online. The case also influenced discussions about the role of Internet service providers and website operators in monitoring and controlling content. Some argued for increased legal liability for platforms that host violent content, while others warned that excessive regulation could stifle legitimate expression and innovation. Law enforcement agencies around the world used the Magnotta case as an example of the need for improved international cooperation in combating Internet-based crimes. The case demonstrated how quickly criminals could operate across international boundaries using digital technology and highlighted the need for faster, more efficient mechanisms for cross-border law enforcement cooperation. The Magnotta case must be understood within the broader context of violence and media consumption in the digital age. The case represented an extreme example of how the Internet and social media could be weaponized by individuals seeking notoriety through acts of extreme violence. The phenomenon of murder for fame was not new, but the digital age had created new opportunities for killers to achieve the notoriety they craved. The ability to directly distribute content to global audiences without traditional media gatekeepers meant that violent criminals could potentially reach millions of viewers with their crimes. The case also highlighted the voyeuristic aspects of Internet culture and the appetite for increasingly extreme content among certain online communities. The existence of websites dedicated to hosting and sharing violent content demonstrated that there was an audience for Magnotta's video, providing the attention and validation that he had sought. The psychological impact of violent media consumption was another important aspect of the case. Research had shown that exposure to extreme violence could have significant psychological effects on viewers, and the widespread distribution of Magnotta's video potentially traumatized thousands of people who viewed it. The case raised important questions about the responsibilities of Internet users who encounter violent content. The viral nature of online content meant that users who shared or discussed the murder video, even with the intention of condemning it, were potentially contributing to its spread and helping Magnotta achieve his goal of notoriety. The Magnotta case became a landmark example of international law enforcement cooperation in the digital age. The investigation required coordination between agencies in Canada, the United States, Germany, France, and other countries where Magnotta had traveled or where evidence of his crimes had been discovered. The case highlighted both the possibilities and limitations of international cooperation in criminal investigations. While agencies were ultimately successful in tracking and capturing Magnotta, the process revealed significant challenges in coordinating efforts across different legal systems, languages, and investigative protocols. The extradition process demonstrated the complexities of international law when dealing with crimes that span multiple jurisdictions. Questions arose about which country had the strongest claim to prosecute Magnotta and how to ensure that justice was served while respecting the sovereignty and legal principles of different nations. The case also influenced international discussions about Internet governance and the regulation of online content. The global nature of the Internet meant that violent content posted in one country could be viewed and shared worldwide, creating challenges for law enforcement and policymakers trying to balance free expression with public safety. The cooperation between Chinese and Canadian authorities in supporting Lin Jun's family and pursuing justice for his death became a positive example of how international partnerships could transcend political differences to serve humanitarian goals. The Chinese government's support for the prosecution and the Canadian government's efforts to keep Lin Jun's family informed about the proceedings demonstrated the human dimensions of international cooperation. The Magnotta case provided criminal psychologists and profilers with a wealth of material for understanding the psychology of fame-seeking killers and the role of social media in criminal behavior. His crimes represented a new category of violence that combined traditional serial killer characteristics with digital-age attention-seeking behavior. Magnotta's psychological profile revealed characteristics common to many serial killers, including a history of animal cruelty, social isolation, and grandiose fantasies. However, his crimes also displayed unique features that reflected the influence of Internet culture and social media on criminal behavior. The escalation from animal cruelty to human murder followed a pattern that criminologists had observed in other serial killers. The positive reinforcement that Magnotta received from the attention generated by his kitten-killing videos appeared to encourage him to seek even greater notoriety through more extreme acts of violence. His choice to film and distribute his crimes was particularly significant from a psychological perspective. This behavior suggested a level of narcissism and grandiosity that went beyond typical criminal conduct. Magnotta appeared to view himself as an artist or performer, with his crimes serving as the medium for his self-expression. The international manhunt and media coverage provided Magnotta with exactly the kind of attention and notoriety he had been seeking throughout his adult life. His apparent enjoyment of his fugitive status and the global attention focused on him confirmed that achieving fame, even through horrific means, had been one of his primary motivations. The Magnotta case established several important legal precedents, particularly regarding the use of digital evidence in criminal prosecutions and the treatment of crimes involving Internet distribution of violent content. The case became a model for how law enforcement and prosecutors could effectively use digital evidence to build cases against technologically sophisticated criminals. The successful prosecution of Magnotta despite his mental illness claims established important precedents regarding the insanity defense in cases involving individuals with diagnosed psychiatric conditions. The jury's conclusion that Magnotta retained criminal responsibility despite his mental illness provided guidance for future cases involving similar circumstances. The case also influenced legal thinking about the appropriate charges and sentences for crimes that are deliberately filmed and distributed online. The additional psychological trauma inflicted on victims' families and the broader public through the distribution of violent content was recognized as an aggravating factor that warranted enhanced penalties. International legal cooperation was another area where the Magnotta case established important precedents. The successful coordination between Canadian, German, and other law enforcement agencies provided a model for future international investigations involving Internet-based crimes. The case also influenced discussions about extradition law and the conditions under which countries would transfer custody of suspects to face trial in other jurisdictions. The German government's insistence on death penalty assurances before agreeing to extradite Magnotta reflected ongoing international debates about capital punishment and human rights. The Magnotta investigation showcased several technological and investigative innovations that would influence future criminal investigations. The extensive use of digital forensics, social media analysis, and international surveillance coordination represented state-of-the-art investigative techniques for the time. The analysis of Magnotta's digital footprint was particularly sophisticated, involving the examination of multiple computers, mobile devices, and online accounts. Investigators were able to reconstruct his activities and movements over an extended period by analyzing his digital communications, financial transactions, and Internet usage patterns. The use of crowdsourced investigation techniques was another innovative aspect of the case. Law enforcement agencies effectively harnessed the power of Internet users worldwide to assist in the search for Magnotta, while also managing the challenges and risks associated with civilian participation in criminal investigations. The international coordination of surveillance and intelligence sharing demonstrated new possibilities for cross-border law enforcement cooperation. The case showed how quickly information could be shared between agencies in different countries and how modern communication technology could facilitate real-time coordination of investigative activities. The case also advanced techniques for tracking individuals across international boundaries using digital surveillance and intelligence gathering. The methods developed and refined during the Magnotta manhunt would influence future investigations involving international fugitives and crimes spanning multiple jurisdictions. The media coverage of the Magnotta case presented unprecedented ethical challenges for journalists and news organizations worldwide. The existence of the murder video created a situation where news outlets had to balance their responsibility to inform the public with their obligation to avoid further traumatizing victims' families and potentially encouraging copycat crimes. Most mainstream media organizations made the decision not to broadcast or link to the actual murder video, instead describing its contents in general terms while focusing on the investigation and legal proceedings. This approach was generally praised by ethics experts and victim advocacy groups, who argued that showing the video would serve no legitimate public interest while potentially causing additional harm. However, the widespread knowledge of the video's existence created intense public curiosity that some less scrupulous media outlets attempted to exploit. Tabloid publications and sensationalist websites provided detailed descriptions of the video's contents and sometimes included still images or brief clips, walking a fine line between informing the public and exploiting tragedy for profit. The international nature of the case created additional challenges for media coverage, as different countries had varying standards and practices regarding the reporting of violent crimes. While Canadian and American media generally exercised restraint in their coverage, some international outlets were more willing to include graphic details and imagery. The case also highlighted the challenges of reporting on mental illness in criminal contexts. Media coverage often struggled to balance the need to explain Magnotta's psychological condition with the risk of stigmatizing mental illness or providing excuses for violent behavior. The coverage sometimes reinforced harmful stereotypes about individuals with mental illness while failing to adequately explain the complex relationship between psychiatric conditions and criminal behavior. Lin Jun's family faced the unimaginable challenge of coping with their son's brutal murder while navigating the complex international legal system and intense media attention. The Chinese government and various international organizations provided support to help them through this devastating ordeal. The Chinese consulate in Montreal played a crucial role in supporting Lin Jun's family and ensuring that they were kept informed about the investigation and legal proceedings. Consular officials helped coordinate travel arrangements for family members who wanted to attend the trial and provided translation services and cultural support during their time in Canada. The case became a diplomatic issue between China and Canada, with the Chinese government expressing concerns about the safety of Chinese nationals studying and living in Canada. The brutal nature of the crime and its apparently random selection of a victim created anxiety among Chinese students and their families about the safety of studying abroad. Canadian officials worked to reassure the Chinese government and public that the Magnotta case was an isolated incident and that Canada remained a safe destination for international students. The successful prosecution of Magnotta was seen as important for maintaining Canada's reputation as a welcoming and secure country for international education. Lin Jun's family established a scholarship fund in his memory to help other Chinese students pursue their educational dreams in Canada. This positive legacy helped transform their grief into something constructive while honoring their son's commitment to education and his dreams of building a better future. The international support provided to Lin Jun's family became a model for how victims' families should be treated in high-profile international criminal cases. The coordination between governments, legal systems, and support organizations demonstrated the importance of providing comprehensive assistance to victims' families regardless of their nationality or background. The Magnotta case exposed significant failures in Canada's mental health system and highlighted the challenges of providing appropriate care for individuals with severe mental illness. Magnotta's long history of psychiatric problems and his repeated contacts with mental health services without receiving adequate treatment illustrated systemic problems that contributed to the tragedy. Magnotta had been diagnosed with schizophrenia as a teenager, but his treatment was episodic and often ineffective. He frequently failed to take prescribed medications and missed appointments with mental health professionals. The system's inability to provide consistent, long-term care for individuals with serious mental illness was a critical factor in his psychological deterioration. The case highlighted the particular challenges of treating individuals with mental illness who also display antisocial behaviors and refuse to engage consistently with treatment. Magnotta's combination of psychiatric symptoms and personality disorders made him a difficult patient who often manipulated or deceived mental health professionals. The lack of coordination between different mental health providers and agencies was another significant problem revealed by the case. Magnotta had contact with multiple hospitals, clinics, and mental health programs over the years, but there was little communication or coordination between these providers to ensure comprehensive care. The case also demonstrated the challenges of involuntary psychiatric treatment in cases where individuals pose a potential danger to themselves or others but have not yet committed serious crimes. The legal and ethical barriers to forcing treatment on unwilling patients meant that Magnotta was able to refuse care even when his condition was clearly deteriorating. The Magnotta case became a defining moment in the evolution of Internet culture and the phenomenon of digital violence. The case demonstrated how the Internet could be used not just to document violence but to actively promote and celebrate it, creating new categories of criminal behavior that traditional law enforcement was unprepared to address. The existence of online communities that celebrated and encouraged extreme violence was revealed through the investigation into how Magnotta's video was distributed and received. These communities, often operating on the fringes of the Internet, provided validation and encouragement for individuals contemplating violent acts. The case also highlighted the role of Internet fame and viral content in motivating criminal behavior. Magnotta's crimes appeared to be motivated primarily by his desire to achieve online notoriety, representing a new category of violence that was specifically designed for digital consumption and distribution. The phenomenon of shock content and its role in Internet culture was another important aspect of the case. The appetite for increasingly extreme and disturbing content among certain online audiences created a market for the kind of material that Magnotta produced, providing the attention and validation that motivated his crimes. The case influenced discussions about digital literacy and the need to educate Internet users about the psychological and social impacts of consuming and sharing violent content. The viral nature of online material meant that users who shared or discussed violent content, even with the intention of condemning it, were potentially contributing to its spread and impact. More than a decade after Lin Jun's murder, the Magnotta case continues to influence criminal justice policy, mental health treatment, and Internet regulation. The lessons learned from the case have been applied to prevent similar crimes and to improve the response when such incidents do occur. Law enforcement agencies worldwide have developed new protocols for investigating Internet-based crimes and tracking suspects who use digital technology to evade capture. The techniques developed during the Magnotta investigation have been refined and applied to numerous subsequent cases involving online violence and international fugitives. Mental health systems in Canada and other countries have implemented new approaches to treating individuals with serious mental illness who also display antisocial behaviors. The case highlighted the need for more intensive and coordinated care for individuals who pose potential risks to public safety. Internet platforms have continued to evolve their content moderation policies and technologies in response to cases like Magnotta's. Improved automated detection systems and faster response times have made it more difficult for violent content to achieve widespread distribution, though the challenge of completely preventing such material from appearing online remains significant. The case has also influenced academic research into the psychology of Internet-motivated violence and the factors that contribute to individuals seeking fame through criminal acts. Understanding these motivations is crucial for developing effective prevention strategies and identifying individuals who may be at risk of committing similar crimes. The case of Luca Magnotta represents one of the most disturbing examples of how the digital age has transformed both criminal behavior and the investigation of serious crimes. The brutal murder of Lin Jun and its subsequent distribution online shocked the international community and forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about Internet culture, mental illness, and the pursuit of fame through violence. The investigation and prosecution of Magnotta demonstrated both the possibilities and limitations of modern law enforcement in dealing with technologically sophisticated criminals who operate across international boundaries. The successful coordination between multiple agencies and countries provided a model for future investigations while highlighting the ongoing challenges of combating Internet-based crimes. The case exposed significant failures in mental health systems and highlighted the particular challenges of treating individuals with severe mental illness who also display antisocial behaviors. While Magnotta's mental illness helped explain his crimes, it did not excuse them, and the jury's verdict affirmed the principle that psychiatric conditions do not automatically absolve individuals of criminal responsibility. The impact of the case on Internet regulation and content moderation continues to influence policy discussions and technological development. The challenge of preventing the distribution of violent content while preserving legitimate expression remains an ongoing concern for platforms, regulators, and society as a whole. Perhaps most importantly, the case serves as a reminder of the human cost of violence and the devastating impact that criminal acts can have on victims, families, and communities. Lin Jun's murder was not just a crime but a tragedy that destroyed a young man's dreams and devastated his family's hopes for the future. The Magnotta case forces us to confront difficult questions about the nature of evil, the role of mental illness in criminal behavior, and the responsibilities that come with the unprecedented connectivity and reach of modern digital technology. As we continue to navigate the challenges and opportunities of the digital age, the lessons learned from this tragic case remain relevant and important. The story of Luca Magnotta and the murder of Lin Jun serves as a dark cautionary tale about the potential for technology to amplify human evil and the ongoing need for vigilance, cooperation, and compassion in protecting society's most vulnerable members. While justice was ultimately served through Magnotta's conviction and imprisonment, the broader questions raised by the case continue to challenge our understanding of crime, punishment, and responsibility in the modern world. The legacy of this case must be measured not only in terms of the justice achieved for Lin Jun and his family but also in terms of the lessons learned and the improvements made to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The memory of Lin Jun, a young man with dreams and potential whose life was cut tragically short, must serve as motivation for continued efforts to build a safer and more just world for all.